there are far more species found in the seemingly devastated clear-cutting areas than in the older stands, exactly the opposite of what most people believe. The number of species is just one measure of biodiversity. When other diversity measures are added, such as the Simpson's Diversity Index, a truer measure of biodiversity is obtained. The diversity index for mature forests is between 0.89 and 0.93. For middle-aged, it's slightly higher and is maximized for all but the very youngest of immature age classes. Contrary to popular belief, even the young clear-cut has a relatively high index of biodiversity. A different group of species occupies each age class, so that in total there is much greater diversity across a number of age classes and forest types resulting from timber harvest than would occur if these forests were protected from all harvesting, which is something environmental NGOs demand. When portions of a habitat are severely altered, there may be a brief increase in numbers as the species occupying the original habitat congregate into the remaining habitat. However, as the favored habitat declines, the species occupying them inevitably declines, just as environmentalists claim. The Endangered Species Act supposedly stops this from occurring because it theoretically prevents the type of disturbance that causes the elimination of the needed habitat. In doing so, however, it creates another problem. At the same time the original species are declining in number, other species occupying the newly created habitat replace the lost species. As succession proceeds and the forest regrows, the replacement species gradually decline as older forest habitats reemerge and the original occupants replace them. Some of these can also be endangered species. The ESA becomes its own enemy. To save one species, action must be taken that threatens the other endangered species. This dilemma is not as uncommon as might be expected. For example, the federal court decision to not allow irrigation in the Klamath Basin in 2001 negatively affected over 450 different wildlife species that depend upon the irrigation water or the crops grown from them. Several of these are also endangered, and the decision initially kept water from several national wildlife refuges that provide water for winter habitat for hundreds of bald eagles and other waterfowl. The Klamath farmers, the suckerfish, wildlife and eagles got along just fine before the ESA. The ESA created a nightmare where none existed before. The only solution is to permit a wide range of uses across the landscape, even agriculture, so as to perpetuate, not protect, the habitat of endangered species. No matter what measure of diversity index is used, biodiversity is usually maximized using a variety of management practices spread over numerous ownerships, each having their own objectives. In summary, populations of endangered species can often be perpetuated by allowing landowners to use their land for agriculture, woodlots, forestry, livestock, aesthetics, investment, and a host of other objectives. Attempting to protect habitats by denying property owners use of their land usually is counterproductive and almost always is impossible because habitat cannot be frozen in time. Many endangered species are more adaptable than originally thought. For instance, the endangered northern spotted owl, once thought to live only in ancient forests, has been found in young forests, even in Kmart signs. Nonetheless, there are endangered species that require more habitat than presently exists in order to ensure their perpetuation. These species are endangered because of the accumulated impacts of all human use. In other words, it's the results of everyone's activities. Yet the way the ESA is structured, the few landowners who still have some of the needed habitat shoulder all the cost of its protection. This is not fair, nor is it the American way. If society caused the problem, then society should bear the cost of perpetuating the species, not the hapless landowner unfortunate enough to be the last one owning the needed habitat. If saving an endangered species is a public good, then the public should pay for it by buying and managing the land to create the habitat needed to perpetuate the species. It is a simple solution, but environmental NGOs decry it as being too expensive for society to afford. But society is already paying for it. They just don't know it. The hidden cost is in the form of regulatory economic stagnation, as clearly shown by the massive worldwide study on the importance of private property rights conducted and reported by Peruvian Hernando de Soto in the early 2000s. The more the regulation uncovers private property, the lower the wealth of entire nations. The Endangered Species Act has probably cost the United States tens of billions of dollars to date. It is just hidden on the backs of landowners rather than all of society, but ultimately it hurts everyone. After more than 30 years, it is clear the Endangered Species Act doesn't work. It's time to get rid of or completely overhaul the ESA. In doing so, we must ask key questions. Do we really want to take land worth tens of billions of dollars from American citizens to fulfill international treaties? The ESA is diametrically opposed to the principles of American liberty and wealth creation. Do species like the Delhi Sands flower-loving fly or the tooth cave ground beetle justify draconian protection when human lives are destroyed? Indeed, are they really even endangered? Society created the problem, so they should pay for its solution. Almost the entire cost of protecting endangered species has been forced onto property owners. If taxpayers saw how much the ESA is costing them by providing incentives to landowners to manage for habitat, it would compel the government to prioritize tax spending dollars on habitat. Incentives rather than penalties work. Such an approach worked brilliantly to recover the nearly extinct wood duck in the early 20th century. It would be a win-win solution.
Instead, environmental groups spur the American people to pass more and more laws and create more regulations in the mistaken belief that the only way to stop environmental degradation is to curtail private property rights. What we as a people do not understand is that by doing so, we are potentially creating disastrous unintended consequences that would harm both people and the environment.